Have the doubled up and ironed piece of our fabric that we had left over and lay our forepart along the same grain, specifically of the lapel, having ironed it nicely as well. Be sure that you have at least 1 centimeter below the mark stitched hem and that the shoulder is flush. Mark on the break point to act as a balance point. Chalk the shoulder on flush, but give it an extra centimeter around the neckline to the notch, and copy off the lapel flush. Keep to the front edge and down the curve, and past the hem inlay a little bit. Give it an extra centimeter below the mark stitches and curve that back up to the top of the curve. From the break point, you can give the lapel a step, which is a surprise tool that will help us later. Or not, in fact, but just start putting it in for now. Plus, it does serve as an excellent indication of where the break point is. Mark either 10 to 12 centimeters from the front edge level with the break point. I suggest that you make sure the facing ends before it would encroach on the flap pocket. On the shoulder from the neck, mark 6 centimeters. At the hem, we need to make sure the facing is behind where the hem inlay starts. We can join these points. Between the shoulder and the break, it should curve, but between the break and the hem, we want it to be quite straight, albeit for no particular reason. Get freaky if you want. If it would infringe on the pocket, then I suggest maybe curve it towards the front edge. Replace the jacket and mark on the midpoint of the armhole to show where you need to put a pleat in the lining. From about 2.5 centimeters below the armhole, mark a diagonal line, moving the end of the ruler down 2 centimeters for the inside pocket, or following about the same angle as the breast pocket. From the top of the cross pocket, mark 2.5 centimeters down, which can be a ticket pocket or business card pocket should you want one. I don't want one, but that's where you'd put it. Make sure that the marks you made intersect the lines so we can see them. Cut out the pieces and cut into the lining pleat and the pocket lines, but not too far, just like a notch, 0.5 centimeter at most. Mark the inside pocket line onto the right side of both pieces. To prepare the lining, lay the forepart back on top of the lining as you would cut it, so with 2 centimeters around the armhole and flush at the hem. Then lay the facing on top of the front as you cut it as well. Chalk the top and bottom of the facing onto the lining. Take the front and the facing away. Mark 2 centimeters towards the front edge from the marks you made. Line the facing up to your new marks and trace off the rest of the raw edge of the facing. Cut away the excess lining along that line. Mark the darts onto both pieces of lining. You don't necessarily need to mark on the width of the darts because they're only going to be about half a centimetre wide, which is about a foot's width. Crease the darts before machining them. I advise that you hold one side of the dart with the weight of the iron, and then hold and pull on the other side of the dart, creasing the dart like that, allowing it to crease more naturally. Things like this are much more easy on a cloth or medium density fiberboard work surface, since the lining is being held by the friction on the board as well as the weight of the iron. Machine the dart by snagging the very top with the wheel, machining outwards towards the centre of the dart, getting to half a centimetre. You could have chalked a line to follow, that would have made it easier. Then turning back in, finishing at the other end of the dart. Back tack on neither, just pull out an excess of thread and triple knot to secure it. Iron the dart towards the back. By the way, my hard drive is broken, so I needed a specialist to recover my files, and this lone specific clip was lost, so you get a shot from my Lloyd making videos instead, though this means there's no footage of me pressing the darts towards the back. Regardless, at the top notch halfway down the armhole, put a small 1 centimetre pleat opening downwards. Iron it and use a couple of pins, or better, basting, to keep it in place. Place the lining to the correct facing. We are placing them each right sides together. As we place them together, we want the tops of the shoulder to match, and the bottoms of the hems can be quite different depending on how you had cut the lining and the facing cloth in the first place. Again, I lost footage basting them, but we need to bend the lining to match the curve on the facing, matching the raw edges. Machine them with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and there is no need to back tack at the bottom, but do for the top. Remove the basting as appropriate, ironing the seam towards the side seam. This way the lining is folded over itself, but the heavier cloth remains flat. Give the pleat an iron as well, being sure that it's consistent. Again, basting it to keep it in place is ideal. To make the inside pockets, I have 4 22.5 centimetre by 18 centimetre pieces of silecia this time, and 4 18 by 8 pieces of lining. On the silecia, mark a line 6 centimetres down from the top. Line a piece of lining up to it and machine them with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Iron up the lining, machine a top stitch to keep the seam flat. Then machine a wide stitch at the top to keep the lining up at the top of the silecia. Trim away any excess if applicable and give them a press. This time I need to copy the angle of the pocket opening onto the pocket. So I place the pocket bag onto the jacket as I want it to hang later, straight down the jacket. Then copy the lining onto it. We need the first line even, so that it's halfway down the lining in the middle of the facing. We draw even on the jacket so that we can mark 1/2 centimeter on top and below the pocket line to see the pocket opening. Well, the point is that there are 3 lines, a maximum of 1 centimeter apart. Mark the pocket width onto that as well, so mark 13 centimeters symmetrically. To save the tedium of doing that a second time, we can take another of the pockets and firmly place it onto the first. Then we just highlight them with some finer chalk lines. On the right side of the facing and lining of the jacket now, mark the starting point on the facing, usually 1.5 centimeters from the lining. We don't really want to chalk on the lining because it can be difficult to remove. A little pinpoint might help you with where the end is though. We need to put linen behind the pocket opening, but we don't often like to put fusing onto lining. Lay the pocket bag lining to lining, matching the angle and start of the pocket to the one you marked on the facing. Baste it in place, being sure to catch the linen too. Double check that the angle of the pocket is how you want it. Start machining along the top chalk line from the middle without backtacking. Get to the corner and do a 90-degree turn down to the bottom of the chalk line. A pro move is to count the number of stitches down you do and make the same amount back up to the other side. Machine back along there to the other corner and back up to the first line. Machine over the first line of machining a couple of centimeters and you won't need to backtack. Here I'm machining some lining into a belt loop of sorts that I'm going to use as a tab. Give it a cursory iron before splitting the pocket opening and cutting to about 1 centimeter shy of the end, where you'll cut the miters. Through everything right to the corners of the stitching. Having removed any basting at this point, turn the pocket through to the other side. Pull the vertical edges of the pocket at the stitching and pull some of the front fabric back to the reverse. Otherwise we'd end up with the lining bleeding over the edges to the front, and it's not an appealing sight. Check that the edges are set as you like them before moving on. Iron open the seam allowances. If you need more guidance, I have various sample videos that you can see. Then you need to fold the jets over the seam allowances to baste them as usual for jets before machining them in place. I'm giving it a pre-machine iron as well. What we can do here is machine all 4 seams in one shot. Here I'm starting just in the middle of the pocket, again machining along the top seam allowance, stopping at the edge of the pocket opening. Lift the machine foot and turn down to machine the chevron. Pull it taut and sew over it a few times. If we basted it well enough, it should turn out fine. At the bottom of this side, make another turn to sew the other long edge the same way as the first. The second chevron is the same as the other, again turning to the top to overlap the first line of stitching. Give it another press. I've folded over my tab and I'm pressing it into position. With the other half of my pocket bag, I'm placing it behind the first and basting the lower welt to the pocket. At this point, baste on any flaps or tabs or fixings or whatever you want to the top of the pocket, as well as basting the top of the welt down to the second pocket bag. Chalk on a stitch line if you feel you need it. I prefer to machine the top edge of my pocket before the perimeter and then machine the perimeter of your pocket. Remove any basting and give it a final press. Trim around the pocket bag to 1 centimeter and cut away a triangle where the jets meet. Taper and layer the top as well, plus if you used linen, cut the corners into semicircles because sharply cut linen can wear down its adjacent lining over the course of time, I guess.